From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. It's been a crazy, even chaotic couple of weeks in Washington, D.C., but then since we're talking about Congress, perhaps that's not surprising. Joining us on Inside Politics today to help put some things in perspective, if that's possible, is Nashville Democratic Congressman Jim Cooper. Congressman, as always, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Pat. It's always good to be with you.
For the last several weeks, it appeared the nation was headed towards a first-ever crisis over defaulting on our existing debt, and there was another government shutdown possibly looming about not passing a new budget. That was coming up in December. But now we have an agreement. Both houses have signed it. It's gone the way of being signed by the president that puts all these budget issues off until at least after the 2016 elections. What happened?
Well, the good news is the crises were averted. The bad news is we're just kicking the can down the road until after the presidential election. This was former Speaker Boehner's parting gift, a bipartisan compromise passed mainly with Democratic votes to try to resolve some of these problems. Otherwise, America faced defaulting on our obligations. It would have been the first time in American history that had ever happened.
Now, the most recent round of craziness in Washington started right after Pope Francis came to speak to both houses of Congress. First time that's ever happened, and that was a real triumph for Speaker Boehner. 24 hours later, he decided he'd had enough of all the backbiting he was getting out of the Republicans in his own caucus, and he resigned. Were you shocked, not just that it happened, but the timing of it?
Everybody was shocked. Now, on the one hand, the Pope Francis visit was one of the high points of all of congressional history. It was amazing to have a man like that in the chamber speaking to us and kind of scolding us a little bit, asking us to do better. But I think Speaker Boehner felt that was probably the high point of his career. Wasn't going to get any better than that, so he decided to resign less than a day later. Now,
he had a hand-picked successor, Kevin McCarthy, but he found out he couldn't get the votes primarily because of some of the Tea Party leading congressmen, particularly those in the Freedom Caucus. So is the Freedom Caucus more or less been running the House more than the Republicans?
They only have 30 or 40 votes, but they're very influential because they're willing to break with Republican leadership, and that's very unusual. And they pretty much took Kevin McCarthy down, so he was no longer a viable candidate. He's still the majority leader, so he's in a position of considerable influence, but to be Speaker, really no one wanted the job. That's the truly shocking thing, to be third in line to the presidency of the United States and nobody stepped forward. And finally, they had to draft Paul Ryan, this guy from Wisconsin. He's a very fine person. Finally, he accepted the position after he put down a couple of conditions.
Yeah, one of those conditions was to be endorsed by all the various caucuses within the caucus. He didn't get an endorsement from the Freedom Caucus, but he had supposedly a supermajority who voted for him. He also asked that the House rule that had been on the books for years but not used very frequently, although it was used against Speaker Boehner. The rule would allow a member to put in a resolution at any time to vacate the chair. He wanted that sort of Damocles removed, but after he got the endorsements of the groups, they quit talking about that. Is that rule going to stay on the books? It looks like it is.
Well, Speaker Ryan has a honeymoon period right now. We're not sure how long it would last, but he was right to want some unity, not to be embarrassed and have a vote, because if he had not won on the first ballot, there could have been chaos in the House of Representatives, because really no one had more than a handful of votes. His chief rival got a whopping 9 votes, and you have to get 218 to win.
Now, when it was in chaos, some people wanted you to talk about running for Speaker, and you had a very interesting line about not being invited to a cannibal event.
Well, you don't want to ever be on the menu at a cannibal's picnic, because a lot of these folks only want you to be Speaker so they can tear you apart, limb from limb. You know, Paul Ryan, who is one of the most conservative people in the House, was vilified on conservative media as being way too liberal for the job. You know, it's amazing how the internet can spread false rumors, and a lot of people believe those false rumors.
Now, Paul Ryan says he's going into a broken house. Can he fix it, and what are the role of the Democrats? What should they do, or can they do to help fix it, or do they want to do anything about it?
Well, Paul is a good-hearted person. He's very intelligent. He's young and energetic. Those are all good things. He's also a specialist in tax reform. I hope he will finally give us some tax reform, because we haven't had tax reform since Ronald Reagan was president. That was way back in 1986. The tax code has gotten way corroded and barnacled up again. It really needs to be fixed and simplified, because hardly anybody can figure out their own taxes anymore, and it's way too complicated.
Now, you've been known occasionally to break from leadership. You did not vote for Nancy Pelosi, who was your party's nominee to be Speaker. You didn't vote for Paul Ryan. You voted for Colin Powell again. Why?
I voted for General Colin Powell several times because he's a unifying figure. He's a person who's a great leader. He's also from outside the House of Representatives. And I'm worried that so many of our problems of brokenness in the House mean that we need an outside and a fresh look. Because if you're part of one side or the other in those past battles, you're not going to be able to solve things as easily. Now, General Powell only got one vote.
Yours.
It's still a maverick choice. But he called me yesterday. He was very pleased with my nomination of him.
Now, General Powell is famous for his quote, I think he got from Pottery Barn, that you broke it, you pay for it, you fix it. Shouldn't the House do that for themselves as well? You don't need an outsider really to do that, do you?
Well, we should be able to fix our own problems, but with General Powell, you have a Republican who's been generally supportive of President Obama. That's unifying in and of itself, plus his diplomatic skills. He's a remarkable American success story, and I think somebody like that is inspirational.
You've had some nice things to say so far about the new Speaker. You've worked with him in the past. You've co-sponsored some legislation with him in the past, haven't you?
I've worked with Paul Ryan for years. He's very capable, very intelligent, very nice. The average Tennessean would really like him. Now, when he became a vice presidential candidate, he had to do some things that were more political. And he'll probably have to do some things as Speaker that are more political. But as a substantive person, he's remarkable. And we both led on a bill called the Defense Flexibility Act to allow our Pentagon to have more flexibility in where the spending should go, instead of allowing politicians to determine their priorities.
Congressman Jim Cooper is our guest on Inside Politics. We're talking about all the craziness in Washington, particularly over the recent budget deal and other issues going on up there. Back to continue our conversation with the Congressman after you watch these messages.